I'd like to hand over to Marie, because it's her meeting really, and off you go.
Well, thank you very much, Mike, and welcome to everybody again. Yeah, we've got a collection of speakers for you this evening on a theme really of women's activism against nuclear weapons in particular, from Greenham Common to today. So we could have made it wider, I'm sure, but I think we've got a really good collection of speakers for you. And the first speaker that we'll hear from is Sue Lent. Sue is a comrade of mine from Cardiff. She's a past social worker, a Labour councillor on Cardiff City Council since 1989, and a socialist and a feminist, and a long-standing member of CND. And Sue was one of the original marchers, one of the original women who marched from Cardiff to Greenham Common in 1981 on the Women for Life on Earth march, which really sparked off the whole of everything else that happened at Greenham from then on. I'm keeping all of the speakers very strictly to 10 minutes because we have a lot of speakers to get in. And for each speaker, what I will do is when you have 2 minutes left, I will give you a time signal and 2 minutes. When you've only got 1 minute left, I'll give you a time signal, 1 minute left. And I will keep everybody strictly to 10 minutes. So Sue, yeah, would you tell us please about that first march to Greenham Common?
Yeah, I mean, 1981, I'm guessing, just looking round at the faces on the screen, that most of you will actually remember 1981. 40 years ago, seems a long time. And that year was quite a pivotal sort of year, I suppose, historically, like a lot of years are. We had the March for Jobs that year. We had the riots. I don't know if you remember those in the summer that kept popping up everywhere. We had a rise in CND, a rise in unrest generally, mass unemployment, Thatcher having come to power 2 years earlier, and a lot of unrest. Miners' strike was a couple of years later. Reagan was in power in America and a very dangerous individual. And America had quite a few bases in this country, including Greenham Common, from where they were going to launch cruise missiles, and they were due to come in the following year in 1983. But not many people knew about that. For me personally, I was a young mother. There's a picture of me with my eldest at about the age on the march. We didn't have very good cameras then, so we didn't have lots of photos. How it all started really was that a woman called Anne Pettit, who you've probably all heard of, had this idea to have a march. She based it on a women's march. I'm not quite sure where, but somewhere else anyway. I should know really, but thought it would be a good idea and was keen for it to be a women's led march. She started on her own. She then got together with a woman called Carmen Thomas, and then eventually there were 4 of them in West Wales. None of them sort of originally from West Wales. I think they were all women who had escaped the rat race a bit and were living out in the countryside and decided that they would march from Cardiff. The first I knew about it, I did see an advert in the paper. We were actually away from Cardiff most of that year because my husband was on a course, and I do remember seeing an advert in the paper, in the Guardian, for the march. I had been involved in student politics and afterwards, and I was a Labour Party member, but that year, I think because I'd had my son and things were very different for women then, I wasn't really entitled to much maternity leave or part-time work, so I actually finished work when I'd had him and he was a year old. So we decided that we would go on the first day of this march, and in fact a friend of ours who Marie may remember, Mary Crofton in Newport, rang me the night before and said, are you coming on the march? So our intention was just to do the first day. Put the radio on the next morning, and Anne Pettit was talking about the march, and there were about, I can't remember, I think she said about 100 people, there were 80 or something, but they weren't all doing the march anyway. So we went down to City Hall, set off planning just to go to Newport. Quite a lot of people there supporting the march, but as the day wore on, I remember Anne coming round to see who was going to do the whole march, and there was just such a good atmosphere. 2 other women with similar age children to my son, and also Helen John, who had a slightly older child, who she had him with her for part of the march. You've probably heard of her. And I just sort of got caught up in it, really, and quite a few of the women said, oh yes, come, it'll be fun. There was another woman with a child, Janet, who said that. It was quite strange because I didn't know anybody else on the march. There was only 2 of us actually from Cardiff, and I went back home at that night, packed up. My husband drove me to Newport and dropped me, and it was quite a strange feeling, just sort of setting off with this child in the pushchair, not knowing anybody. I think 36 women, 4 men, and 3 babies. And another small child of Helen John's. There's a picture of us actually that appears quite often in places. I don't know if you can see it, but that's women crossing the Severn Bridge. And as I was always at the back, you can probably see me. I'm the one with the long hair pushing the pushchair, and the other woman pushing the pushchair is Helen John. So we made our way along the route. Chepstow, Bath. Bristol was quite indicative, really. Most of the places that we went to, small places, pretty much all church groups supporting us. Bristol, very, very quiet for a big place. Not many people turning out to meet us. But it turned out that one of the things that had happened was that when Anne and the others were planning the march, they talked to CND, who'd been very sort of sceptical, and who are you? So they'd call themselves Women for Life on Earth. They gave them quite a small grant, which they had to pay back, and were really quite sort of mean. Bristol CND could have done quite a lot, whereas it was the small places really that turned out a lot of people, all church groups, from the Quakers who put people up the night before the march set off, to I remember the Catholic priest in Marlborough coming out and talking about the Pope had just made an edict that nuclear weapons were evil. And the vicar came out at Hungerford and said, I'm Hungerford CND. But that was our smallest reception, really. We had lots of people, small places, often seemed like everybody had turned out. So it was a very good atmosphere. And most people who stopped to talk to us were either kind of a bit curious. We didn't get a lot of hostility at all. We did get, at that time, the generation who'd gone through the war, we would get people, saying about the deterrent and we need this, and, talking about the war and the bombs that dropped on Hiroshima, and, they were seeing that as having ended the war and that. But one of the critical things about the cruise missiles was that they were first strike weapons. So it wasn't even like they were a deterrent. And of course, they weren't under British control. They were under the control of the Americans. So it was all a bit scary, really. And we sort of trundled on through the countryside, a very innocent little group, really, quite a mixed group. Look, quite a few mothers of large families. And I think the feeling was that, we were doing this for our children. We were scared about what was going to happen. That pamphlet, Protect and Survive, was out and was distributed actually in towns that we went to, and that became Protest and Survive for us. Just quickly, when we got to Greenham, there wasn't an intention to camp, but we had talked over a few days about women chaining themselves to the railings. And I think there's a picture of Eunice Stallard chained to the railings, and I think that's another one of her with Chris. so they just stayed, and the peace count grew, as you probably know. I think one of the critical things was we did another march from Greenham up to London in the October, and I didn't realise until very recently that CND said if we wanted a speaker, we'd have to do that march. We could only have 2 minutes, but Anne spoke for 5 minutes and publicised it and said, you know, there are loads of bases, go and camp at them all. And it grew from there. December 82, a lot of you may have gone to the ringing of the base in December 82. And I think it became very, very well known, obviously. I remember 60th anniversary, John Cox, who Marie will know, active CND person, introduced me to Bruce Kent, and he said, wherever I went, he sort of took my hand and he said, wherever I went in the world, people always asked me, how are the Greenham women? And I think that was, you know, that does kind of sum it up, really. And obviously those of us who've gone up over the years, the cruise missiles did arrive. There were some very brave women. There were all the court cases, and eventually the cruise missiles went, and the common is returned to the people now. And that's also thanks to the Greenham women, because you've got women like Jean Hutchinson who did an awful lot of court work to actually get the common back for the people. But that's kind of the story in a very short time. Sorry.
Thank you, Sue. I'm just so sad that we don't have a roster, really. I think maybe Sally and Mike at a later stage we could have some of these speakers back to do more justice to the topics, because I think 10 minutes isn't going to, it's not going to satisfy people. But thank you so much, Sue. You got us off to a really good start there, and you've set the scene and reminded us of what things were like back in 1981. I'd like to introduce next Sylvia Boyes. Is another veteran peace and justice campaigner, and also a veteran of Greenham Common, actually. She's from Keighley in Yorkshire. And Keighley. And she's been involved in countless direct protests. She's been in prison for her actions, most recently, I think, in 2015. For everything from cutting fences, entering bases, blockading, and really whatever she can do, whatever she can come up with to stop Trident. So again, Sylvia, I'm really sorry that you've only got 10 minutes, because I know this is just, it's going to be such a squash. But again, I'll give you a 2-minute warning and a 1-minute warning. Thank you, Sylvia.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very hesitant because, there are people here that know much more about these things that I'm going to be speaking to than I do. But I would like to just connect the Greenham Common, with Trident Ploughshares, if you like, just that I did go to Greenham Common. I went in the spring of 1982 from Scarborough just as a one-off visit. And then, of course, got involved with the first surround the base and blockade. And I don't know whether you can show the photograph of my being arrested at the emergency gate with Georgina Smith, who was at the other connection with Trident Ploughshares, of course, because she owned the wood where Trident Ploughshares has had marvellous camps and actions over quite a few years. So can we see that? Oh, you've got them all. These women of Greenham, the middle one. Can I click on it? No, never mind. It doesn't matter. What the photograph was that the photograph was taken in the March, but it was actually on the colour supplement of the Observer in December for the 30,000 women, around the base event. So, and Georgina, I was arrested. That was the first time I'd been arrested. We'd gone up to the emergency gate to see what was happening. And I didn't meet her again until we're in the Coolport Woods in 1998, 99 time. So it was quite amazing, really. So that was just a personal connection, if you like, with Greenham Common, because I found then that I could cope with being arrested and being transported, and how well, of course, I deal with court cases is a different matter, and go to prison. It's just one of those things. I'm not saying it's that I'm any better than anyone else. It's just that I know I can manage with those things. I tend to go off at tangents, friends, so I'm afraid I will have to be wary. But as I was looking through my bits and pieces, as one does when one's thinking about the past like this, I came across a letter that I'd obviously written from Style Prison, I think it was, but to home, to my husband. And I'd actually been reading The Shadow of a Saint by Ken Saro-Wiwa, the Nigerian, who was, of course, arrested and falsely accused of various things in Nigeria. But if I could just read you this, as I say, this is one of my tangents. The true prison. The magistrate's writing in her book, punishment she knows is undeserved. The moral decrepitude, mental ineptitude, leading dictatorship, spurious legitimacy, cowardice masked as obedience. That was one of his statements, I think, in court, and it was quoted in his book. And he's also said that, well, it's reported that in his trial, he wasn't even able to give a statement. Now, for many of us who've been arrested in these various situations, for many of us, giving the technical legal arguments and everything, it is giving that personal statement that is all important. That it's coming from us, that this is our truth. They may disagree with the court, but they have to accept that this is our truth and we have a right to give it. And sometimes, of course, magistrates don't want to hear it and don't let us speak. But gradually, I think over the years, it has been more accepted that we do have that right. Things may be changing, as all sorts of things are changing in terms of doing action against things that we deem to be either unlawful or unjust. And those is one of the things in the present time we're certainly going to have to consider. So I did go to various things at Greenham, and then when the cruise missiles actually came, I lived in Scarborough, and I decided that I would go home, and of course, well, I hadn't really left home, I had just visited Greenham. Fylingdales, the ballistic missile early warning station on the North York Moors, was just a few miles away from Scarborough, and a little bit easier to get to than Newbury and Berkshire. So I decided, I got involved with things there, and it was at the time when they were changing the 3 radomes into the phased array radar, in other words, upgrading the system. And there was now this huge concrete structure right on top of the moors. So I got involved with that. I started to go up to Faz Lane and sort of widened my sort of place as a protest, if you like, in that way. But I'd already got myself involved with peace campaigning. I think I started to go to Quakers in 1972. And in 1978, I actually joined. And at that time, it's already been said, late 70s into the 80s, there was a great upsurge. It was the Cold War and the East-West relations, and Quakers were very much involved with our relationship with Russia and Soviet Union as then. And it was what really, we started a peace group, I'd organised meetings, street stalls, but what really urged me into action was watching the war game. That was, made for the BBC, and they refused to, or they couldn't show it, and so it was being shown around local groups. And that to me was just an eye-opener. How could we talk rationally about the effects of, one small bomb that had overridden an airway or whatever it had done? That film I found so disturbing. I had to then go out and do more, which I tried to continue to do. But it was watching that really spurred me into doing it. And I really would like to discuss with people when we say that the young don't know of the effects of nuclear weapons, was it just fear that made me go out and do something? The fear of, I don't think it wasn't fear. It was just the sheer anger and the people in governments. This is where they were leading us. And a word of, sorry, friends, I'm sorry. And so I kept going, and then 1998, Angie Zelter, after the ruling from the International Court of Justice about the ruling on whether it's illegal, started Trident Ploughshares. And I joined with that, based in London, got involved very much with the organisation, did lots and lots of things up in Scotland at Coolport. Trident Ploughshares is a very, very, or particularly at the beginning, a very, very organised organisation. The words that have been written, look on the website, there are books upon books about it, and for me to sort of speak in 1 minute is a total situation. So, but I found that the main point is that by dividing into small affinity groups, that is the strength of the way any big organisation can move forward safely, so that you build up that very strong base. Individuals, small groups combined into a larger group, making it possible to really take large-scale actions. I shall end there. I have failed miserably in saying what I was going to say. So, Marie, I did say I shouldn't be speaking.
Sylvia, you did brilliantly. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you so much. I think you highlighted the importance of the court appearances after the actions, which is so important to a lot of the protesters to actually appear in court and have their say. And I've made a note to watch the war game because I don't think I've ever seen that.
Really? I'd be interested in hearing what you think of it then, yes.
Yeah, and I think you've also, you know, when you refer to affinity groups, we're going to hear later on about Extinction Rebellion, XR Peace, and I feel very much that they, you know, XR wouldn't be what it is today without the peace movement and the learning of affinity groups and that way of working. So thank you so much, Sylvia. You've done a good job there. Thank you. I'd like to introduce next Jane Tallents. Jane, I think I'm right, Jane is from Scotland, but Jane, you know, like Sylvia, is another veteran really of non-violent direct action, and has also been imprisoned for peace actions. And one of the many roles that Jane has taken responsibility for herself is supporting people when they do come to court. Because she did used to live in Helensburgh. I first met Jane when she supported my son, who his first appearance in court was after a Fas Lane blockade. And Jane had built up this fantastic knowledge of the kinds of arguments that you could use in court for why you were not blockading illegally, but you actually had a right to be blockading. Jane is going to speak to us about Fas Lane, possibly Fas Lane 365, and touching on something about XR Peace to bring us kind of more up to today. So thank you, Jane.
Right, thank you, Marie. It's good to see you and so all of you here, but certainly some of the friends that I've definitely been partners in crime with on other occasions. I've written a few notes because every time I tried to practice this ad lib, I realized I just, like Sylvia, it's very hard not to just go off and kind of go around, you know, not cover what we need to cover, just to try and make these links tonight. I wonder if I can screen share, and then I can perhaps you can see look at a few photographs instead of just looking at me. So, hey, so in the 80s, peace camps very much brought into focus the places where nuclear weapons were developed, were built, were deployed, were controlled. Both the US ones like the cruise missiles at Greenham, but also the UK's nuclear weapons system like Polaris, which was then soon to be replaced by Trident. And inspired by Greenham, there were these camps set up in, I think, up to about 30 places around the UK. and we worked very autonomously, and we had the network between us by, you know, using phones and writing letters and all the stuff we did in those days to kind of keep in touch. And we had meetings now and then to bring people together from all the peace camps. And I moved to Faslane Peace Camp in 1984, and I lived there for 6 years. And the camps, in a way, were always a daily reminder to everybody about what went on in those bases. And it was a kind of a base to bring other people in for big protests, to gather information about those places as well, because it's also secretive. And also very much part of peace camps was to really be a pain in the butt to those establishments and do whatever we could to remind them it just wasn't okay to do what they were doing, and that there were people who objected to that strongly. So Faslane, very much like Greenham and Molesworth and Upper Hayford, that some of you all know, kind of saw non-violent direct action as a very important tool in the peace movement's toolkit, and that we organised both public big mass actions where we brought lots of people in, like at Faslane we had the rainbow marches where we went through the colours of the rainbow, and we had a specific day called lots of people to come and take part in blockades or trespasses or getting into the base, and also lots of just quite spontaneous small actions from people that were staying there that would go and do things like our friend Pamela, who swam across into the dry dock and spray painted it with "Who Dares Swims," because like the SAS motto is "Who Dares Wins," but she put "Who Dares Swims" on there. And the Faslane Peace Camp is still going. I wouldn't say going strong. There's not very many members there. They're looking for new residents, but it will be Faslane's 40th anniversary next year, so we'll have to start thinking about what we can do to kind of mark that. Sylvia's already said about Trident Ploughshares starting in 1998, and it was very much that same kind of spirit of combining the audacious, the creative, seize the moment kind of anarchy of peace camps, but with that, as she said, that very organised, strategic kind of planning ahead and working together in affinity groups to put a challenge to the government. Like at the beginning of Trident Ploughshares, there was a letter sent to the government and said, look, you've said that under the NPT you'll get rid of nuclear weapons, but if you don't do that, then we're going to do it for you, and we're going to break in there and we're going to do our best to dismantle them. So why don't you talk to us? And of course they didn't, and they still never really have. We've had exchanges of letters, but it doesn't seem to get us much of anywhere. But the fact that we were willing to do that, I think, was really important. So this is a picture now of a big blockade at Faslane Northgate that Trident Ploughshares organised. We had, I think our biggest one, we had about 1,000 people there on one day, and there were 380 arrests. And we filled up 6 police stations right across Glasgow. From that, just that one day's action, the local courts decided to prosecute 200 people. We had a local prosecutor who took it all terribly personally and felt that he needed to make an example of people. And so it was a fantastic kind of movement building thing that he did for us, really, because so many people came to court continuously, and because I lived really close to the court, in fact moved into a flat right opposite the court in the end, and so people, I could be in touch with people beforehand, give them information about what the procedure would be, organise them accommodation. And when we'd get there that morning, people I hadn't actually met, because during the action I was probably sat in a flat somewhere on the phone doing legal support, but we'd get together and go, oh, you're so-and-so, you're so-and-so, oh yeah, you're Marie, or whatever. And we'd get together and we'd build this fantastic community in the court that just felt like it took away all their power in a way, that we were something different, that we got this thing that united us, and we really importantly needed to make a stand. We were quite cheeky, we'd use their courtroom sometimes for things like, if I had a mailing to go out, I'd take it over with me, and in the breaks we'd all sit and stuff envelopes, and it felt like we were kind of using them. And also some people would end up in prison from time to time, and that led to some great support particularly in Stirling, where the women's prison was, where the local group took over doing a lot of support for prisoners. So then out of Trident Ploughshares came Fastlane 365, very much in that same kind of spirit, really. And I was part of the core group that organised that. This is for 2006, 2007. We said we would have a year where we would blockade the base every day for a year. Now that just seemed an impossible and crazy kind of idea. But we thought it was really important to give it a go. And we reached out to lots of different groups. It was interesting, the peace movement groups were very wary, and they were like, yeah, you're crazy, you know, we can't do this. So we kind of went beyond that. We went to the religious groups and to knitters and to teachers and to just lots of people outside that who hadn't really thought about nuclear weapons, and went and talked to them and said, here's this place, can you commit to get a group of you to come for 2 days and do something whatever feels right for you, and take some sort of action here, however many of you can do that with support. And so that led to lots of people that had never been there before and never done anything about nuclear weapons. Oh, 1 minute, oh gosh. So, right, I'll quickly just mention then XR Peace, which when Extinction Rebellion started, as we say, we can see it looked very familiar to us, and we tried to make that connection between the peace movement and the environmental movement. And we were very active in the rebellion in the October 2019 down in London, and did lots of actions at the MOD and kind of military related places, but also joined in with the actions in Trafalgar Square and everywhere. And people seem to appreciate, you know, that we were there. And obviously we changed the age demographic a bit sometimes of the groups that were there. So we've continued trying to make that connection, that militarism leads to climate change and climate change can lead to war. So it's to me a very much a follow through from Greenham all the way through all these different things to where we are now, and to where we're trying to work together towards the COP in November in Glasgow. Right.
Thank you. I feel so bad having to cut across these. Thank you so much. Yeah, you mentioned the role that many peace camps have played in really raising the profile of the anti-nuclear campaign. And I noticed that your picture was a very nice sunny day, but I also know how difficult it is to live in one of those places when, on cold, wet days and times. So thank you for everything you've been doing all these years. And yeah, thanks, Jane. I'd like to introduce Nuala next. Nuala Young is more local. Nuala was one of our Labour councillors on Oxford.
Green Party councillors.
Oh, sorry, Nuala.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know where I got that from.
No.
Green Party councillor from Oxford City Council, and like Sue and Sylvia, she was also one of the people who was active at Greenham, which goes to show really how much that actually sparked off, how much Greenham was a real sort of fertile place for other campaigns. Nuala was involved in setting up the first peace camp at Upper Hayford, north of Oxford, and has been involved in countless singing blockades. A number of us speakers here are singers, so that's an interesting thing as well. Nuala is going to talk about Aldermaston Women's Peace Camp and bring us up to date on what is happening over there today. Nuala, over to you.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Marie. Yeah, the Greenham for me was a life-changing event, especially the Circle the Base. So it's wonderful to have heard a bit about that. And Jane was a brilliant support, such a brilliant support at Fastlane after I was called up to court at Fastlane, that I was really disappointed when the police witness didn't turn up and I had to go all the way home again without using that confidence that she gave me. So I have carried on the various different actions, and it's great the way we support each other and give ourselves a sense of solidarity. So just to go back to a bit of history maybe about the Aldermaston Women's Camp. It was in 1985 that 3 of the Greenham women camped overnight at Aldermaston. And they then set up this monthly camp. But then by 2009, the MOD thought they had to really inhibit their actions a little bit, and new bylaws were brought in that they were not able to touch the fence. Can you imagine? This meant no banners up on the fence. And so the women got together to bring a court case about that, and chose somebody who was in a financial circumstances that were helped to be able to do that. It was really a bit Alice in Wonderland, as many of these things often are. At the judicial review about it in the divisional court, one of the judges said, well, of course, you have to imagine, if it's a very hot day, we can imagine it today, and you need to take off your coat, you need somewhere to hang it, you know, on the fence, obviously. So that was the reason he gave for letting them be able to touch the fence and put things up on the fence. Quite weird, anyway. So they actually won that business of being able to touch the fence, but they lost the right to be able to camp there. So they brought that to appeal. And then they had another judge who had distinguished between private and public landowners' rights. It actually was about deer hunting. He was on the wrong side as far as I'm concerned. He was stopping a council who wanted to prevent deer hunting on their land. And he said the public interest meant that the public ownership had to allow the public use of the land. So this judge then later on at the appeal for the Aldermaston women then agreed that actually they had to consider our rights as public on this public owned land. And that we had from the Article 10, we had the right to protest. And that the other thing he said, which I was quite fascinated by, this was actually the only women's only space, I expect the women may have said that, left in the UK. So I'll wait for people to come back on that for protest. And therefore this was something which should be held on to. He also said, which was quite nice, that the MOD had shown they could cope over the 20 years with the women camping there, which I thought was very good anyway. So that's why the women can be sort of fairly relaxed going there every month. So every month, usually it's the second weekend of the month, women will meet there. Usually a few women go up on the Friday night. I mean, it used to be a proper camp all weekend, but we've shrunk a tiny bit to making it sort of 1.5 days, basically. And we set up, and I think it is really important, the banners that we have up around the entrance to the base there, and also across the roundabout. And the number of hoots in support that we get every month is increasing. It's wonderful, and cheers, you know, people. And the main thing I think that's good as people approach, it says Trident, who profits, for example. And we have wonderful peace flags up, which are very uplifting all around the roundabout, and lots of banners on there. The camp itself is actually quite pleasant, I have to admit. So it's up against this ghastly nuclear weapons factory there, basically. And it does seem to get bigger each time I go. I think I should have done a photographic journal of it each time. But when you're down in the little dell, which is to the side of the entrance there to the factory, it's as if you're in another world. You have oak trees overhanging and lovely sort of fir trees and bluebells and cowslips and all these things. So it's a little grassy area where we're allowed to camp. And we usually, even recently, the last camp, we had a token fire. We felt that probably was enough with some twigs, but we usually managed to have a fire. The thing that helps them also is that they have a caravan in which they can store the things. So somebody will go to the caravan and get the things we need, the chairs, the table, things like that every month, every Friday, and then we'll set up for us there. So we're setting up then on the 3rd of September after the march, this second march, which is wonderful, to Greenham, I think. And on the Saturday morning, which would be the 4th of September, we'll have talks and we'll have somebody making bunting, which I think is quite a good thing for all our celebrations that we're going to be having, maybe up Paz Lane next year too, for that. Bunting's very useful. She's going to bring her sewing machine and everything material. So we'll have the talks, and in the evening we'll be having a cocktail party with wine and music. And we think actually the wonderful people, silly little girls, right, who are organising, have got a grant, right, and are going to try and organise a minibus to take people back, so to Greenham, if they've come to the party. But we will have loos there, we'll have a few tents, sleeping bags and things like that. So calling for, we would like to have ideas for an action on that day about the police bill. We think that's something really important for the subject we've got now, actually. We'd like to have some women to join Elsa and me on that march from Bristol to Bath and Bath to Melksham. Third thing is we'd like to organise a car share from Abingdon and Oxford, and people can get in touch with me if they'd like to be part of that car share to the September action. And the other thing, last thing, is the August camp. Women are very welcome to come to the August camp, which starts on the 6th of August. That's the preparation night, and then it'll be the 7th of August to plan all these things that we'd like to do. Okay, that's me now. All right, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Nuala. That's great. Thank you. So there are things that we can get involved with today, coming up the next couple of months, August and September, and I'm sure that Mike will make sure that that goes around on the newsletter, all in due course. Thank you, Nuala. Well, our final speaker today is Lynette Edwell. I've introduced several speakers this evening as a veteran of Greenham, but Lynette is from Newbury and was closely involved in the peace camp at Greenham Common for the entire length of the protest. And since then, alongside her peace campaigning work, what I believe is that Lynette has worked to ensure that the lessons of Greenham will be remembered, particularly the way that it became the hub of an international network, really, weaving connections across the world and building those links for peace. Lynette is here to tell us how we can get involved in celebrating the 40th anniversary of Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp. At the end of the summer and into the autumn. So Lynette.
First, I would like to say hello to Sue Lent. I am shocked and hurt that she didn't recognise me. I was there on the day she came to Newbury, and I was the one who washed the lettuce for the salad. There we are. That was my claim to fame. And all these dreadful women descended on us. And they stayed, and within 6 months they'd moved in with me. So I was a member of Newbury Campaign Against Cruise Missiles, who virtually dropped me and became a CND group. And I helped also to set up Cruise Watch, and we did the media on that. And basically it was seeing Greenham in and out, because in those days, not many of us had phones. Public call boxes didn't work. So various women stayed with me, and it just became a very convenient place to drop in and to have a bath, use the phone. And then after Greenham, all the stuff women had left behind, divorce papers, love letters, newsletters, personal reports, newspapers are compiled, left the love letters out, and they've gone to Berkshire Records Office, and bits and pieces like getaways are in the museum. So that's my history. Helen John I met the day she came, and we were very close friends until her death, and I really do miss her still. And I do keep in touch with Anne Pettit, so I like to know what's going on. Otherwise, we're looking forward to the 40th anniversary, which seems to be a jumble of scary women coming in on a march, Aldermaston Peace Camp, great, which we want to have a connection with at Orange Gate. Then there's a lot of things going on at the Control Tower, who are planning talks and exhibitions. But at Orange Gate, we're keeping under the radar. So this is what will happen. Women are welcome to come from Friday night, where Audrey will be there. And she's sleeping over with Mizzy and a group, and they're sleeping over Saturday night. And on Sunday, you're invited to a picnic, because by then, you know, I think everyone who's doing everything has stopped and they just want somewhere where they can socialise. So Orangegate would be a good place. Now, I want to remind people of what they need to bring. If they can bring food, drink for themselves and to share. And if they need to cook it, bring a utensil to put over the fire, and to bring water and wood. And if they're staying overnight, for God's sake, bring a chair or somewhere to sit down, bring a sleeping bag and somewhere to sleep. On the Saturday, there will be hopefully transport between Orangegate and Aldermaston. So we won't be competing. Hopefully we'll be able to whiz from Orangegate to Aldermaston, and Aldermaston can whiz to Orangegate. On the Sunday, about midday, we're having a picnic. So if you're coming, please bring some food to share. You're very welcome. Please bring a musical instrument if you play. You're very welcome. The only other thing we thought of was, this is Audrey and Annie, if you have white ribbon and you want to write the name of someone, a Greenham woman who has died, we're thinking of tying them to the trees. You can either have one large ribbon which you tie, or individual ribbons with women's names. I think that's about it. Have I stayed within my time? I have. Jolly good.
Thank you, Lynette. Yeah, you certainly have. I've made notes on all those bits of pieces that you've asked us to bring along.
Yeah.
It made me realise that I've got, it is itself a reprint. I've got a reprint of the Greenham Woman song book, songs that are collected over the years from Greenham Comment. And I wonder if we could find a way of getting that reprinted as a bigger print and selling them.
Hang on, you've got copyright problems here. So you could best talk to Rebecca Johnson, who's doing something similar at the Control Tower.
Okay, right. Well, if it's already being done, it's
well, no, I mean, your aspect of it could be different and different songs, but I think it'd be a very nice idea at the Control Tower. One of the suggestions I've made is they distribute song sheets and have communal singing. The only problem with that is that women who've written really good songs haven't had an acknowledgement. I don't think they're looking for money, just acknowledgement. But just be careful with songbooks for that one reason.
Yeah, it's not my print, as I say. It's already printed, so yeah. I guess I imagine that they looked into all of that. Thank you.
We have reprinted Jean Kay's songbook from Greenham.
Oh.
So we've got a number of copies, and we've probably got it on Owen did it, and we've got some copies, and we've probably got it on the internet, or in a memory stick.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, Nigel, that's the one. Thank you. Great. Okay, so we've had a really informative group of speakers. We've stayed well within our time, so Sally and Mike will be pleased. Sally, have we got some time for discussion and questions now before we need to, do we need to finish about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so we do still have time for any questions or comments, contributions from other people who've been involved in direct action. I can see a question from Carol. And is there anybody else? I'll take Carol's question and then come back for a second contributor. Thanks, Carol.
Thanks, Marie. It's more of a contribution really than a question, although there is a question in it somewhere. First of all, I'd like to say thank you ever so much to the women who've spoken tonight. You inspired thousands, including me. I was there in 1982 ringing the bass, and I did go on to take part in the Snowball campaign and get arrested there. I'm really sort of concerned about what we're facing now in the world. It's becoming ever more dangerous. We're facing weaponization of space. How do we ring the bass of space? That's one thing that I was pondering. And the arms trade, that seems to be getting ever more vicious and cruel. And the new Cold War against China. So we do have to look at perhaps new and different ways of organising. And I was really quite moved by people who are talking about joining in with other groups, outreach, unity in action, church groups, the environmental groups. We have got to find ways of working together, because that's the only way we're going to defeat this kind of stuff. And we're up against the police bill. Somebody mentioned the police bill. We've got that to face as well. It's becoming an ever more cruel and dangerous world. So my question is, how do we embrace space?
That is a big question, and a big worry to a number of us. Nigel, I don't know if you have an answer to that, or
yes, I would, because Trump instigated the space whatever part of the US Air Force. We are involved, all our local peace groups are involved at Croughton, USAF Croughton, and that is where possibly there will be a ground station for some of the stuff they're doing on militarizing space. So please keep in touch, because Croughton is increasingly important, and we do campaign there, and that is the nearest we have locally to what's happening in space. And we are part of a global network on that. So that's quite important. It's what Sylvia said, it's strength in groups working together, and that's what we do. The other thing I would just like to mention, just briefly, is my little group in Melksham put up the original marches. We had 2 members in the march. Helen John told me a number of times that is when they began to think about staying at Greenham. So, you know, there's been a lot of outside help with this, and the inspiration of those women in the march has been incredible. Worldwide, it's wonderful.
Thank you, Nigel. Anne, would you like to come in?
Muted. Yeah, it was just a query about Greenham, really. There's been mention of the control tower, and I'm not sure how that all fits together with marking the 40th, you know, the anniversary there in September. I'm kind of not clear in my head what control, you know, what is happening and who is organising at the control tower.
That's a good question. Thank you, Anne. Could somebody explain, please, the way that Greenham Common has been developed? Maybe talk about the Peace Garden and the museum, and explain a little bit about that for people who might not know about that, please. Who would?
Can I come in on that? Right. Scary Little Girls are a separate organisation of younger women, some of who came to Greenham as children, and they want to help record the history of Greenham for younger women who are forgetting. They're organising the march and a set of activities. Greenham Control Tower is financed and somewhat limited because of this by the local council and Greenham Common Trust. They have a very token say of what goes on in Greenham Control Tower, which has been used as an exhibition centre and museum. It used to be a case of myself and the previous organiser constantly battling so that it wasn't full of Second World War stuff. And that Greenham got represented. We have a small representation there. So both of them get grants and stipulations with the grants as to what they can and can't do. I believe the Control Tower are going to have enactments of Greenham women, etc., which will be hilarious, as the real thing will be Orange Gate. But, you know, fine. And they're going to have singing, and they've had some of our song sheets. You know, I like to help the locals along with their history. after they've been so ghastly. And the same people who were so awful to us in the olden days find us interesting legends now. So they'll come along to have a look. I mean, one man said, you weren't so bad, really. And I thought, I couldn't say the same about you, but there you go. So, you know, it's interesting to see us being presented as something else, which is how we'll go down in history. But as I say, Scary Little Girls is somewhat separate. They're doing the march, they're doing activities. The control tower is very much watched, what it does and what they can get away with. And I've suggested various things, like showing Carrie Greenham home, like showing Cruise Watch, having a sing-song, but watching it with the songbooks. And I think they will do none of these things. I think they will have little enactments, but there you are. I have told them. But it could be good fun.
Thank you, Lynette. And Jane has put in the chat the link to Scary Little Girls if you want to find out about their march.
Yes.
Or, you know, more about the tower and so on. Nuala, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say there will be talks by people at, I think Di McDonald and others are going to be talking at the control tower, as well as these.
And Rebecca.
Yes.
And Rebecca and hopefully Aldermaston.
It is on
women will have a show.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I hope that answers, does that explain a little bit better, Anne, what's about? Yeah. Okay, any other thoughts or contributions? If people would be interested, one of the things I wanted Sylvia to talk about, but she didn't get time to talk about, you remember that quite recently, I think it was 2018 or 19, the government, I don't know which one it was then even, it was probably Cameron's government, decided to open the door, and they had the gateway decision about replacing Trident. Because up to that point, yes, they'd already made the decision actually, but they hadn't formally formalised it in Parliament. And at the point where the decision was about to be made, a group of people went into Parliament, the Houses of Parliament, and occupied the lobby, which is very close to the, you know, the chamber where speeches are heard and so on. And the singing could be heard from inside the chamber. I don't know if you want to say a couple of words about that, Sylvia, and then I've got the, would you like me to show a little bit? It's quite a short.
Yeah.
I would love you to show it.
Yeah.
It'll make up for my total failure.
Right, let's
No photography, please. No photography, please.
Our struggle's hard, but victory will restore our lives to our hands. It doesn't matter if you should jail us, we are free and kept alive by hope. It doesn't matter if you should jail us, we are free and kept alive by hope. Our struggle's hard.
Singing myself. It really was good, and I had to leave earlier, but they stayed right through till the end. Jane, where are you? You were there. I think Sarah and I had to leave earlier, but it was a good action. Would you agree, Jane?
It was a very good action.
As is well known, the UK Armed Forces have helped.
Sorry, that's the voice of authority there. We don't want him.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the chat of to the YouTube video, because I think it wasn't quite streaming right. But you can't hear the voice of the police there saying, no photography, because that was my partner who stood next to me here. He was surreptitiously trying to film us without the police grabbing the camera off him. So.
All right. So was the sound not very good then?
It is on the YouTube. It's brilliant on the website, on the YouTube.
But on my here it wasn't. Was it from?
I don't know why. That's why I'm a bit disappointed. But anyway, but many thanks.
Sorry, you couldn't hear that very well.
We were there a long time because we stayed. We expected to be thrown out pretty quickly, and we weren't. And so we just stayed and right through till the debate and the vote at 10 o'clock at night. So there was a great deal of bladder control going on there, I can tell you, but we stayed the course, and we sang till we were hoarse. And they could definitely, at the end, when they rang the bell for the vote, they threw the doors open and we could see right down into the chamber, and we just found our voices again and just belted our singing down to them before they went off to vote.
Yeah, I'm glad we got that win. I'm sorry the sound wasn't very good, but the link is on the chat if you would like to go and see it. At the end there, you saw Angie Zalter was just in that last still. Angie was one of the people we would have liked to have come along today, because Angie was very instrumental in getting Trident Ploughshares going right at the very beginning. And what I've put on the Angie unfortunately couldn't come tonight, but she did ask me to mention her book. Her latest book is called Activism for Life, which is obviously a you know, that has two meanings really. And I've put a link to where you can find more information about that as well, if you'd be interested in Angie's latest book, where she talks about her life of activism really, and some lessons that can be learned. Okay, Anne?
The sadness is that was such a brilliant action when the renewal of Trident was passed, and yet the upgrading within the last few months, because of COVID restrictions and because Parliament was just almost silenced, there was not the opportunity to challenge that, and that has just slipped through.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right, Anne. That's quite true. It is. There are some attempts to challenge it legally, though. So although we haven't had very much publicity about it, we may hear more about that in the future. Yeah, because there are some legal challenges. Nigel?
Yes, Newquatch has published a report, and that indicates that that was monitored and tracked by Newquatch, that increase. So it was sussed out, and although the government puts another kind of point on it, Jane can perhaps elaborate a bit more on that, but Newquatch has a report on that showing that those numbers are already there. We've already done it, and maybe it's part of the upgrade, I'm not sure. Jane could perhaps elaborate on that. But so they've already done it, and that's how this government operates.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Marie?
Thank you, Nigel. Is there anybody who'd like to speak who hasn't spoken yet? Anybody at all who'd like to say something? Perhaps hasn't said anything this evening at all yet. Okay, in that case, I'll bring Nuala back again. I know Nuala wanted to say something.
I just wanted to say that it must have been in the 1980s, about 30 or 40 of us actually applied to lobby our politician. And so we did that sort of caucus dance in the centre of the lobby. And the idea was that if they arrested us there in Parliament, they would have to try us in Parliament. And I think that's probably why they didn't arrest you there. I think it is time to consider that sort of implication again, perhaps. We were held in Westminster Hall for a long time. And then one person gave up, and gradually we should have stayed, but everybody ended up feeling they were going to keep us in forever, I think, until we gave up. But anyway, and I just want to reiterate that a colourful action is really wonderful, even if it doesn't seem to have an effect at the time. And the action that people remember as well now is that we'd like to do something a bit like the domestic extremists action. I don't know if you remember women getting at Aldermaston with sort of those caps on the turbans on their and brooms and ironing and things like that when they'd been called domestic extremists. So we need a bit of humour maybe to do something about the police bill, and that's another thing that we need to do, but Trident obviously needed.
Yeah.
Can I just sort of make a plug for the United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons?
Yeah.
That anything, in a similar light that to associate with that, because really, it's such a marvelous thing. And it's how to really perpetuate that feeling of hope and joy from July 2017, when it was actually went through the United Nations. And the whole of all of the nuclear weapon states are acting like a mafia group in the Security Council to maintain their own power against the rest of the world. So anything that anyone can think of in this sort of light of actions that we're talking about would be brilliant.
Yeah, I would just really like to thank Sue, Jane, Sylvia, Nuala and Lynette for giving such an interesting evening and sharing their time with us and their anecdotes with us and their experience with us and teaching us such a lot. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you as well.
Thank you for organising it.
Yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All I'd like to say is I fully endorse what Marie has just said, and I'm kind of so impressed, and there's so much awareness of not just the past, which is absolutely right to be aware of and to recall, but of the present situation as well. So thank you, Marie, for organising it. Thank you to all the speakers, and thank you for contributions to everybody else who contributed. And as far as I'm concerned, that's it.
Right.